Morning everybody, we're on the River Ancholme today, which is right at the top of our patch in Lincolnshire, Northamptonshire. It's December the 20th? Yeah. December the 20th today. It's still not been that cold though for this time of year. We've noticed there's still a fair bit of weed around on some other rivers we've been on. So yeah, we haven't really had many frosts yet, but the water temperature now is down at 6.5 degrees, which should be enough to get fish shoaled up. That kind of magic temperature is around 5-6 degrees, especially for big bream shoals. So what we've done is just put in, there, you can just see the Land Rover down there, showing the chat with those pikers, they're blank so far. Yeah, so we're going to go upstream, see what we can find, come around the loop, and then have a look at some off-channel habitat. And yeah, what we're expecting today is fairly similar to what we always say this time of year really. You're looking for key habitat features. So anywhere with a shelter or off-channel flow, anywhere, you know, a bit more protection from cormorants, that's where we like to see big roach shoals, some quite big pike following them around, and we think there's going to be some bream up here as well. So yeah, we'll do a bit of filming during the day. We've got the standard setup, we've got the side scan here, which gives you the bank to bank. So that's the right hand bank just there. You know, there's the left hand bank, you can see it's kind of piled, looking across that way. And then we've got the multi-view off the front, so when we do find fish, we'll go in close with them. And yeah, we'll turn it into a video report and hopefully it'll be interesting, and we'll see what we find. But what I'll do now, I'll talk through a little bit of some of the work we've done on the Ancholme before, and I'll just show you on the computer some of the work we've done in terms of what we know about the river. And yeah, one thing when you look at it on a map, for example, is that the Ancholme is very, very featureless. It's basically one long straight, you know, it's almost like a Roman road really. It's some straight as far as you can see. It's got like with two what you might call bends in it, but yeah, not much off-channel habitat. There's bits and bobs, and it's starting to get a bit better in places. But I'll talk you through some of the work we've done in the past and what we know about it so far.
In terms of fisheries monitoring on the Ancholme, it's been monitored for a long time now. We've got some data sets going back to the late 80s from it. The majority of monitoring done kind of that time through the 90s into the noughties was netting sites. So we had a series of netting sites up and down the river. This is a screenshot just of the some of the sites, for example, that we used to do. So yeah, Snitterby's one of the ones we still got. Yeah, we've got a few others at Brandy Wharf, etc. But a lot of them are historical now, so they've become more difficult to resource. And as I'll speak about later on, yeah, fish distributions change as well, and yeah, the weed growth on the river is more excessive. So our results will come in less accurate. So yeah, we've got some quite good data sets on that in terms of netting. So these netting sites give you species composition. So yeah, we get an idea of the kind of species in there and size lengths. And then as technology kind of advanced into the noughties, we started using hydroacoustics. So you may have seen these maps before, but what we do in the middle of the night, we drive down the river. This is from 2018, these results. Normally we do it around May time. It's quite difficult to judge it because what we see is we see fish shoaled up for winter time, and then if we get a cold spring, then sometimes don't distribute that much. But also we've got to do the survey before the weed comes on it, because otherwise we don't get very good results. So we usually try and survey in May, and yeah, the results from here are all the fish were pretty much spread above Brig, yeah, going towards Brandy Wharf. And that was because I think, you know, as temperatures came up, as you'll see in a bit, Brig's one of the main overwintering sections. They kind of spread out slowly from there, and the section down to Ferriby Sluice contained little fish. So this is a snapshot in time really. Obviously fish move around, and during summertime what they do, they expand along the entire section of rivers they're in, and they feed and they utilise all the habitat there for spawning. And then winter time they tend to aggregate in large numbers, and this is what this next survey video is about really. It's about the new technology we're using to understand the fish distribution and the pressures that force them into these large shoals we see. So yeah, we have got some good data on the Ancholme in terms of its past. I'll show you some of the monitoring we do now with the newer technology.
This is a section upstream of Brig. You can see how straight it is and fairly featureless. Yeah, no twists, no turns, not much marginal habitat really, and then you get this effect of winter retention. So yeah, I mean this is decades old really, and a lot of rivers in Lincolnshire, Northamptonshire is the winter retention level. So the idea is you bring the water level down in winter time to increase the defensive capacity. So you can see on the bank, hopefully on the bank there, it's probably down 40 centimetres or so, and what that does, that just exacerbates that lack of habitat really for fish. Yeah, any little roach and stuff like that, during the day, if there's a cormorant out here, you've got absolutely no chance. You've got to be hidden away. So that's when we think in a little while, and when we look at some off-channel habitat, they'll be crammed in there. Because if you're a little roach out here, you know, your access to habitat's poor anyway. The winter retention exacerbates that. You've got a little bit of kind of marginal vegetation there to hide away in, but in reality, that's a big restriction on a river like this. You know, in winter, there's going to be no fish down here, and we're seeing that. That's moving along on the multi-beam. That's the bed, and you just see the surface just there. That's the side scan. Yeah, absolutely nothing really. So yeah, what we'd expect, no habitat in winter, no fish. Yeah, I mean, most anglers know this already, but yeah, if you're fishing in wintertime place like this, you've got to be on a spot where it's going to hold fish, because if you take a punt in the middle of nowhere on a section like this, it's not going to hold any fish. So we mentioned winter retention back then, just a good example of the impact it has on fish and their access to habitat. So you can see, I hope you can see up there, it's probably more than, I think I said 40 centimetres, probably more 50, 60 centimetres down. But what that does is, you see all these overhanging branches that probably used to dip down in front of the into the water are now high and dry. And if you're a roach, you know, branches like that are absolutely key, because even where the water line is there, coming out to 3-4 metres, you've only got still 30-40 centimetres water. So basically that whole margin now is of no use whatsoever in winter time, which is when they need it most for over a colour. So all these things that used to drape down in the water, you know, fish could hide in there, roach could hide in there. This one especially just here, look, that's gone now with winter retention. So you've basically got on either side of the river, you've got the main channel down there. That's got, you can see on there, so that's the bed, that's the surface there. That's kind of moving towards us as we go. You can see there's absolutely no structural habitat down there, and the cormorant sat on the wires a minute ago when we went underneath it. So yeah, for them that's ideal, because they can just come down here and feed, you know, and that hunting behaviour will change fish distribution massively, because as just shown, there's nowhere for them to hide. You know, that's out of the water now, just there. So what we see from that is you see roach of kind of, you know, any kind of fodder size for cormorants, and they will shoal up in key locations. So what I do now is, yeah, as predicted, nothing down this stretch whatsoever, go back towards Brig itself and then look at some off-channel stuff. And yeah, I'll just illustrate the difference in fish populations and how habitat is absolutely key. And you know, environment agency always mentions habitat, and you see it written about all the time, but it's a key example. This really is, you know, it just shows how important it is. And in a minute we'll find a lot of fish where there is habitat. We've just come around the old channel, and we're underneath a road bridge now, which, yeah, all anglers know is classic habitat for fish. So upstream, absolutely nothing up there, you know, all up to, well, all the way basically to main river, nothing whatsoever. And yeah, underneath this road bridge, and yeah, I hope you can see in there, look, loads of fish. And if we just extend the range a bit on this as well, yeah, basically we can barely see through in places. They go, let's look out towards the side of the bridge just there. Yeah, the water column is completely full of a small roach, and they look like, most of them are probably 0+ fish. So that's fish that spawned this last summer. So they're quite small, probably 60-70 mil, those ones. There's a few bigger, better fish there, you can see, but probably better stamps in there. But yeah, there you go, a couple of better fish there. But it's classic. Oh, we want some little skimmers in there as well. Hang on, just hold us there. Right, so that's turning the gear on its side now. Oh, it's some perch. I think they're perch actually. Hang on. Yeah, turn the gear on its side. Bear with me, one-handed. Yeah, just there. You can see the perch there. You can see the prickly fin. Just, yeah, big pack of little perch down there, chasing these fish around. So yeah, there they all are. Look, that's looking up towards the surface a bit more. There's the surface there, and absolutely rammed in here. So yeah, what we'll do, there's the perch again. Oh, it's got a good shot of perch there. We'll go down this section now. There's a couple of shots match fishing down there, but yeah, pretty much this is where most of the fish are. Again, classic overwintering really, looking for that extra bit of habitat. What we'll do now is just very quickly take some measurements from some of those small fish we just saw, just to help build a bit of a picture of the size kind of structure and the age grouping of the fish in this shoal. So what we do is just mark them on the software, and then go through the measurements. You'll see some little numbers and lines put on the screen now. That's just taking a quick subsample. Again, it's quite selective, that is, because it's ourselves selecting them, but it's, you know, just a good way of getting measurements from a fish without having to touch them and interfere with them, and then it helps us build a picture of the population structure, and I'll illustrate that in a little bit. So yeah, still at that same section, absolutely the whole water column. So that's looking towards this wall just here, and all this kind of snow footage is just pure fish. Looking around to the left, oh, and you see the pike hitting into him. You can see him on the screen now. That's that fish just there that's just hitting to those ones. We'll try and get some footage of the pike smashing into them. So if we roll the camera on its side now, you can see it's pretty much, it's just in fish completely from surface to, hang on, surface to bed, look. So that's, yeah, so the pike just in front of the boat coming up towards us. I'll split the screen as well when we post the data. But you can see how they give the pike their berth. So that's the bed, that's the surface. Looking around, so the whole water column is just completely solid with fish all the way around in front of the boat. So we'll pan back round now. Some good pike in there as well, lots of double figure fish. Yeah, it looks quite full down here.
This next snapshot of footage just shows some of the pike and perch on the hunt, and this was going on all the way through the section. There were people queuing up on the bank actually, just bystanders, just watching them feed. But if I press play, you can see we're in amongst the roach. There's a little perch just there, just on the bed. And then a second, the first pike comes in. I think first one comes in from the right, followed again by the second one there. Look. And then extend the range a bit more. One comes in from across the top, and then another one comes in from the left there. Look. And that was just going on non-stop. Yeah. And when they feed like that, there was really good numbers of pike actually. That's some of the best aggregations we've seen on the Ancholme. It's to be expected really, because that's where all the food is. But this kind of fry feeding was going on full time really. They're just swimming around with the mouths open, and sooner or later they get lucky. So good conditions for pike to feed in. One of the methods we use is to roll the sonar on its side, which has become really useful in terms of IDing fish species, even in small numbers. So what we try and do is get close up to fish. This is speed up a bit to make the video a bit short, but we can just kind of see them side on really. It's really useful because even when the water's turbid, we can look down at the species. So some of the perch we saw, good images in a second, they sat on the bed, these perch shoals swimming around. We don't often see perch like that, so it's nice to get some good images of them. You can see the pike, again, ambush predator there, he's in and amongst the bushes on the edge, all the little fish swimming around him. But again, just a good example of how the technology's come on really, from what we used to have in terms of IDing fish, and just being able to look at the numbers and their behaviour really without having to touch them. So it works quite well now for us, and I'll show you some really good pike images in a second. Nice fish there. This is a really good example of that footage I was just talking about. So this is why we try and use this technique in winter really. So as I said, we wait for the fish to shoal up, for the water temperatures to drop, and then when you get the roach and the fry around, you get the predators that follow them. So what we're able to do is get really close up to fish. That fish is, you can see there on the range, it's between 1 metre and 2 metres from the front of the boat. So it's literally touching distance, and you can sit there, you can look at it, you can see it's fin away, and you can ID it really easily and get a good idea of what's going on. And we're able to touch them, and they're so close to us, but we can't see them because of the mud really. So this is why we do it in winter time. Wait for those conditions to be suitable. So you've got the roach and the silverfish come in, and everything else will follow them. So we see this a lot in all our rivers, and I'll explain a bit more about this later on in terms of distribution and behaviour. There's a perch in there as well. But this is why the method's so good for us now, because it's given us a much better understanding of fish behaviour really, and how the impacts of them in terms of habitat and water level management, etc., moves them around really. So really good bit of footage. This video is speeded up a bit, but just helps to illustrate the size of some of these shoals of fry that we see during winter time. So if I press play now, it's when the boats move through that section. It's a few pike in this bit, but you can just see that they just keep coming really. And that's the that pretty much be a lot of the 0+ fish that spawned last year, and yet they all get together for protection. So you'll have seen the perch and the pike after them. That's why they're doing it really. They're doing it to shoal up, because there's safety in numbers. So what we do, we just keep going through the shoal really until we see where they end. They just keep coming and coming. A bit more weed in a minute. See a bit of weed in front of the sonar there, but they're still coming after that. So there's lots and lots of fry down there, loads of small fish, and then a bit further down the section we start getting to a better stamper roach, and I'll show you those in a second. So that shoal of fry went on for a good maybe 70-80 metres, just bank to bank. Surface to bed, completely solid. But when we got through them, we got to the better stamper roach. So this is a little bit further downstream, pretty much connected to the fry. But you can see bigger fish in there. Still a few smaller fish, but in a second you'll see a lot better stamper roach coming through. Fish well over 20 centimetres. So what we did, let them all swim past. Again, quite a good technique this is. Let them swim past, and then you can take some measurements off there, which will add to the length frequency graph. So these are the better stamper roach now. But for the anglers that are fishing there, then it's quite difficult to get through to these, because there's so many fry around. That you often see that winter time. You literally can't get through to the bigger, better fish. But these are where they were, exact the same location really. So good numbers in here coming through. But again, got to put it in context really. So these are probably one of the biggest shoals in the Ancholme at the moment. There's very likely to be few others really, because of they're all in one spot. So got some good data on these though, good measurements, and we'll add this to the length frequency graph, and I'll show you what that means in terms of population structure in a second. When you put those measurements together into a length frequency distribution graph, this is what you see. So along the bottom we've got fish size in centimetres, So you've got a maximum size of 34, 35 centimetres there. And up this side is the number of fish that appear in each one of those size ranges. So this graph is very selective. So obviously I've chosen fish to measure. If you were to pull a net down the section and count every fish and measure every fish in the old-fashioned way, it'd look a bit different really. There are a few less gaps in it, it'd be a bit smoother. So I've purposely chosen to measure fish in small sizes to mid-sized fish and some of the bigger sized fish as well, just to get an idea of what kind of age structure we're looking at. So what you see is, yeah, you've seen yourself on the footage that vast numbers of fish in the size, you know, between 6 and 10 centimetres really. So they're the fish that were spawned last year. Yeah, huge numbers of them, and as they get older, then their numbers get smaller pretty much because yeah, mortality takes over from various different factors. So you get good recruitment into the population, and they get older, your numbers of fish get smaller, but the size of them get larger. So you're looking at some of the big roach we saw over 30 centimetres, so yeah, 1 pound fish, maybe coming on for 8, 9, 10 years old. So yeah, again, this is very selective. I'm sure some of the people I first started with, if they were still here now and I produced this graph, they'd tell me to hang my head in shame. But yeah, without touching a fish though, it's quite a good way of getting data and representative, just to illustrate that, yeah, we know recruitment in the river is good, but winter is probably the most important factor for survival of those fish. How do we get all these fish in this size group that you saw through to bigger sizes, yeah, to 30 centimetres plus. So yeah, that's how the roach turned out. There's probably a few skimmers in there as well, but I think from looking at some of the shadows and some of the data we've seen before, yeah, pretty confident that would reflect, you know, fairly well what it would look like if we to do it the old-fashioned way with a net.
Side, but yeah, real big shoal of fish, and again, all in, you know, the whole population's in this section really. So it just demonstrates, you know, the need for overwintering habitat, the impact of increased predation, and also how vulnerable they are, because you've got 95% of the Ancholme fish population in this section of river just here. So yeah, if they're in there, you know, one single water quality incident, one pollution in the wrong place, one accident, and yeah, that's it. Yeah, you'll lose them pretty much. So yeah, just highlights pressures on fish population. So we'll go in there, this little section now, and have a look at the bream.
Most of the footage of the monitoring so far has been from the multi-beam sonar, because it was so shallow and the fish were so tightly shouldered up. Then we couldn't use the side scan to too great effect. But once we stopped looking at the roach shoals and went looking for the adult bream, then that's when the side scan's really useful, because we can travel quite fast with it, and then we can look at large distances. And because bigger fish like bream shoals, adult bream shoals, because they're pretty much between 35 and 60 centimetres in size, they don't need so much shelter habitat in winter time. They can survive out in the main river a bit more. And so what we do is we go down the river, and then we take a side scan and mosaic it. So this is the bottom of the section, probably around 150 metres long. And then if we zoom in, this is the right hand bank, the left hand bank. What we can do is we can start looking at different fish shoals. So you can see how it works pretty much. So the sound waves, they find a fish target, which is the bright white kind of light, and then you can see the shadow on the bed cast afterwards. So these are bream, and we see these targets all the time around Lincolnshire, Northamptonshire. So that's how we find the bream shoals. So once we find them, we go through with the side scan, and then we try and take an overview of the numbers. You can see they're still going up here, and then we go back with the multi-beam and get some measurements. So what we're to do here is go back and mark all these in red on the right hand side and get a number estimate. Now there was just under 500 adults in this particular shoal, which is just yeah, relatively close to the roach shoal, but we found some more further downstream as well. And normally, if it's a lot colder, if it's 3-4 degrees, you can see that it's just under 7 degrees water temperature. If it's around 3-4 degrees, we tend to see bream really tightly shouldered up. But around 6-7 degrees, with a bit of turbidity, they're a bit more confident to go out and feed, so they distribute themselves like this over wide areas. So we didn't get a full, well, what we call a full shoal estimate, because they're kind of bits and pieces, and they were like this for quite a long way down the river. But yeah, from the 500 and so we saw here, and the ones we saw further down as well, then yeah, I'd say there's at least over 1,000 adult bream in this section. But that's one of the things we'll look at hopefully next winter. Yeah, when it's a bit colder, what you really want is a week's worth of frost before you do the survey. But I'll show you some of the multi-beam sonar footage we got when we went back into these shoals to look at the species and get some measurements. So just under 500 bream in that first shoal we found. This is sneak up hill them in roll mode. So again, just to follow them with the side scan, slowly move through them, and just to get some IDs so you can see them quite well. You know, the fin outline and how they're behaving. So yeah, Good example of a bream shoal in winter. This is a bit more distributed than normal. Yeah, bit colder temperatures, and they'll be a bit tight shouldered up. But even so, we've got some good footage of them. In terms of angler catches on the river, then yeah, there's every chance that you can still get some good fishing, but it's more likely more difficult than it used to be. In terms of some of the dynamics of fish, how they behave in the Ancholme, then yeah, during winter time is probably an important question you've been asking yourselves really, is that what are all these fish eating? So you've got, in terms of numbers, yeah, an estimate, if you were to pull a net through that section, I mean this is the roach shoals and the bigger roach, most of them are 25 to 30 centimetre fish swimming past. If you were to pull a net through the section we did with the sonars, yeah, and got all those 0+ fish, and these fish, yeah, over 1 million fish is quite feasible. Yeah, probably more to be honest. But yeah, big question for that is what are all these fish eating in winter time? So obviously fish digestion slows down in winter time with water temperatures. They don't need quite so much food, but they still need to eat. And how do you get a meal if you're a roach in such, you know, a big shoal as that? So what will happen is during the day, yeah, pretty much these fish will all shoal up like you see, and as soon as dusk comes, they'll distribute down the river, and they will pretty much go out and feed, and then yeah, as the sun comes back again, they'll come back to the same spot. Now we see this a lot in Lincolnshire, Northamptonshire, lowland water bodies, big diurnal trends we call it, big shifts in fish distribution, because they feel much safer at night time coming out to feed than they do during the day. So that whole shoal you saw, that footage, that'll distribute around the Ancholme in probably fairly short distances from where they like to shoal during the day, and then they'll come back again. So yeah, and then as summertime comes, water temperatures come up, weed growth increases, they feel a bit more confident, they'll be out again, back out the main river, and that whole shoal will distribute down the drain. So, and we see that everywhere. That's a really common thing. So if we go back to the same spot again next year, the fish will be in the same spot. It's as simple as that. And in terms of surveying, it's made it quite easy. Yeah, in terms of fish pressures and acting on them though, yeah, I'll explain a bit about that now. And you know, some of the things that drive this shoaling behaviour. In terms of the pressures that act on the Ancholme, the list on the left hand side there is by no means exclusive to this one river. You can pretty much apply those pressures to any water bodies in the Lincolnshire area, especially the lowlands, places like the Fens, the Wide Witham, the Wide Welland. So yeah, they're pretty generic, but as time's moving on, they're becoming more and more high impact, shall we say, and that's pretty much the impact of humans on our river system. So I won't go into massive detail on each and every one, but I'll just give you a few examples. So climate change, for example, past 5 years or so, we've seen particularly warm spells in summertime. You know, we sometimes have 2 weeks worth of weather when the temperature's over 30 degrees now easily. And what that does, that can exacerbate, for instance, some like the nutrients in our rivers and the less water that goes down, and as the demand for water for domestic and industrial use kind of grows. Just these things can combine to things like we see on the right hand side there. So that's duckweed, that is, all the way from Hawkstow Bridge down to South Ferriby Sluice. And that duckweed thrives on conditions where it's warm, high nutrients, and not much flow, and that's ideal for that to grow. So that will generate multiple times, you know, within a week. And so yeah, you can get our whole areas covered. And what that'll do, that'll knock down the dissolved oxygen levels in there, so your water quality drops. So a lot of these things are connected. You know, the water level management and habitat. Obviously, the winter retention level is extremely important in the Ancholme. It helps to stop people's houses flooding. But what that does, again, it increases the pressure on the habitat. The habitat's not there. And then predation. And we've seen a lot more cormorant increases in the past 20, 30 years. And that's not me being anti-bird at all. But yeah, make no mistake about it. And roach shoals are really, really scared of cormorants. So yeah, when that habitat and that winter level comes in, again, it dials up the pressures on predation. So a lot of these are linked. In terms of fish long-term numbers, yeah, most of our fish populations have declined since the 1980s. Yeah, I'd be very surprised if there were many that hadn't really. And then anything on that list can play into that really. So if you look at the eels, for example, in the Ancholme and everywhere else, you know, the eel numbers have crashed really. In 30, 40 years time, it might be a rarity to see many of them around at all. So yeah, big impacts, and as our climate changes, as the levels of nutrients in our rivers are high now, then these are things we see. So even if you don't see dead fish, the water quality, for example, low dissolved oxygen levels under duckweed like that will be impacting, you know, egg development, larval development, etc. So yeah, it's a wide-ranging case of things really that are impacting our fish species. It's not just one thing you can pin it on, but it's multiple pressures they're under. So yeah, hopefully that's given a bit of background to the Ancholme. So what we're trying to do is try and serve out again later this year in winter time, so we'll get a better look at the adult bream and in terms of numbers and sizes, and also we'll do a bit of a longer section maybe downstream just to double check there isn't fish hanging around further downstream. But I am I'd be surprised if there was. I think from what we've seen everywhere else, you know, the key overwintering locations is where everyone goes. If you're not there, for example, if you're a £1 roach out in the middle of the Ancholme in winter time, yeah, you won't last very long. You'll be eaten by cormorant within an hour. So that's the reason we've seen shoals with fish like this. And again, that shoaling will dial up on the pressures for feeding, pressures of food availability, the high increase in terms of parasites and disease when you're crammed in for long periods, and it just dials up a pressure, that you know might not have been so prevalent a few years ago. So yeah, that's kind of monitoring we do. We'll keep producing the reports from around the area, and hopefully it'll be interesting to watch. Thank you for watching.